recording and the transcript will be published afterwards on the States Assembly website. All electronic devices, including mobile phones, should be switched to silent. And for the purposes of the recording and the transcript, I'd be grateful if everyone who speaks could ensure that you have stated your name and your role. So if I can begin with introductions, I'm Deputy Helen Miles, Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel.
Deputy Jonathan Renniff, member of the panel.
Deputy Alex Curtis, panel member.
Good morning, Deputy Lyndon Farnham, Chief Minister.
Deputy Malcolm Farry, Assistant Chief Minister.
Paul Wiley, Chief Officer of the Cabinet Office.
Leslie Darwin, Chief People Officer.
Andrew McLaughlin, Chief Executive Officer.
Jason Whitfield, Chief Information Officer.
Lovely, thank you. And I'd just like to draw your attention to the fact we have 2 hours scheduled for this hearing. This is the last quarterly hearing that we'll be having before the budget. So, Chief Minister, firstly, can you update us on the discussions taking place with ministers and at the Council of Ministers level through your workshops to prepare the proposed budget for 2026 to 2029?
So yes, basically the budget discussions and workshops are based focusing on reprioritisation of spending in line with the Common Strategic Policy. We've had, I think, 6 budget workshops now addressing the issues. We've moved away from the traditional growth bid process this year to focus on the CSP priorities. And of course, any urgent priorities ministers have, they're bringing forward, and discussions are ongoing with Treasury officials on how we can build those into the budget. And the thinking behind that was because I think it's getting more and more challenging every year to balance the budget, not just because of the fact that we have seen some exponential growth in the cost of running Jersey, but also current global economic challenges have made us have to relook at tax revenue estimates and so forth. And so I think I'll probably leave it there really, but that's...
So when is COM intending to meet then to give final approval for the budget?
I'm not sure when the final approval will be, sometime in August.
Late August.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
late
you.
August. Mm-hmm.
Chief Minister, will the proposals revealed by the Deputy Chief Minister serve an authorised statement ahead of the proposed budget?
Well, Deputy Chief Minister had informed me that he was speaking to the media. I think we know that Tom is Dom. He feels very passionately about the breakwater issue. It's ongoing discussion. It's all part of the budget discussions, as is the Investing in Jersey programme, which incidentally I hope to be able to give you a private briefing on next week. And as Deputy Binay said in his short interview with ITV, it's all part of the budget process. We can't sort of move forward with that until we can agree what we can pay for. So it's ongoing discussion.
I mean, he's quoted the amount of £350 million for health and infrastructure. Is that the correct figure?
Well, I think if you were to probably include absolutely everything, that's the sort of figure you would be looking at, but that's unlikely to be approved simply because of the financial challenges. And I think Deputy Binay is now moving his focus onto the health aspects of it, which I think are more realistic. So it's an ongoing discussion.
So if 350 million is not really affordable, is it going to be less than that?
Well, when you say 350 million, it's not necessarily, or when you talk about sums like this, about when you see Investing in Jersey, it's how much of future budgets we're going to reprioritise to that spending. It's not necessarily additional money that we're having to find.
Do you know what the actual figure is?
Well, we don't know. We haven't agreed what components we're going to pass yet. So it depends on what we pass.
When will you know?
I would think definitely by the end of the budget process at the end of August, because any ask has to go into the budget, will be scrutinised as part of the budget, and then be debated and approved or otherwise by the Assembly.
Do you know privately which projects are going to be going ahead?
No, not at the moment.
You don't know privately, okay. No. Are you able to share the terms of reference for the various projects that are going ahead?
Do we have business plans and so forth?
So as part of the business, as part of the budget setting process, those items that may get funded have been asked to produce outline business cases. They are being developed at the moment.
But are there terms of reference for Project Breakwater?
So there is. So Project Breakwater is the kind of term that was used to make the political case for an increase in capital investment. Actually, what that's morphed into is an understanding within council ministers that we have underinvested in capital for over decades and underinvested in maintenance. I think what we're now in a position of is the council ministers debating on that they've accepted that principle, and then therefore what are we wishing to fund in the future. So it was never kind of a programme, capital P programme in that respect.
Despite the fact that the Deputy Chief Minister said that this is going to cost 350 million. It's not going to be a programme.
So as the Chief Minister said, it depends what you want, what as a council ministers, they determine you want to fund. So there's no kind of hard lines around this that's called breakwater.
I'm not even sure where the terminology breakwater came from, actually, but it sort of stuck with
Just a randomised
The term Project Breakwater has been used throughout this year. You've made reference to it yourself
I've
in
even
January.
used it, just saying I'm not sure where it emerged from, but that's what we refer to it as.
You know, in March you said that we'd be very clear by June that we'd have clear terms of reference. So we're just following up some of that.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Deputy Minister, do you just want to make a comment there?
Well, I think I'm not clear whether what the Deputy Chief Minister said was a bid for money or whether it was a statement of what is going to happen. Was he effectively talking to the media to campaign for something?
Did you see the interview?
I did.
So it's a fairly short interview, about a minute long. I looked at it myself. And I thought it was fairly benign. It was a really update through to the media. But he was clear that it was part of the budgeting process. And so that's what it is.
I think the issue that we have as a panel is, you know, we spoke to the Treasury Minister at her last quarterly hearing. She was quite clear. We asked her about the budget and she said, you are asking about something that's going to be in the budget and I am not going to tell you what is going to be in the budget. Now, scrutiny panels throughout have been asking ministers for information, and we have constantly been told that we will be the first to know when there's news to share. And yet, in this case, the public were the first to know because the Deputy Chief Minister made the clear announcement that he wanted 350 million for health and infrastructure. You know, you have a code of conduct, Chief Minister, that you published yourself in, you know, earlier in the year. Regardless of whatever media or means, executive members shall adopt a no surprises approach regarding announcements, ensuring that ministerial colleagues and then the state's members are notified in advance of the media. Your Deputy Chief Minister, it would appear, didn't follow that route despite assurances. So do you think he's breached the ministerial code?
No, I don't, and I don't agree with the rhetoric that's being peddled around that. You've seen today, economic development ministers made comments on the front page of the paper. I think you can turn to the media every day of the week and you'll find ministers talking about policies and priorities within their own portfolios. And I've encouraged that. We're an open government. One of the first things I did when I took over as Chief Minister is gave the media full access to all ministers. So they could do just that. He wasn't announcing anything as a fait accompli. He was talking about what one of his priorities was. And he specifically said, we're discussing this around the Council of Ministers tables. We're having challenging discussions about it, and it's part of the budget process. I don't actually see anything.
Okay, I think
really
we can understand that he is the Minister for Health and Social Services, but he was making significant comments about infrastructure projects. Yeah. And if you look back at what the Infrastructure Minister has said, it is completely contrary to what the Deputy Chief Minister was saying. And I guess, you know, what is the use of a ministerial code if ministers can operate with impunity? Because actually this was a surprise. Scrutiny had assurances that we would be the first to know, that we would be properly briefed, and we weren't. We have a press release, we have a statement, you know, verbal and written from the Deputy Chief Minister that announces 350 million will be required.
Well, I mean, it's not, I think, realistic to expect Scrutiny to be briefed on every single ministerial announcement. It's just impossible because it's part of the of the work we do.
But it's in the code.
No, I'm sorry, it's not. Deputy Binet was not making a specific announcement about something that was happening. He talked about something that was in the process. And when that process has got to a stage, as I've probably said 6, 7 or 8 times in written questions, oral questions and questions without notice in the States, as soon as the Council of Ministers has agreed in principle the detail of what Operation Breakwater we're calling it like, which is basically around, the vast majority is around the infrastructure, around the health service. You know, so you can conflate, you know, those two terms.
But
if you
it's
like.
not, is it? It's around 4 regions, it's around other capital
No,
programmes.
well, I mean, you see, it's all being conflated a little bit. Fort Regent is a project that's being led by the Regeneration Steering Group. The only other aspect of that is the markets, and he's been discussing that with the infrastructure minister, and there's a difference of opinions of the level of investment that need to go into
certainly a difference of opinion.
into the
that's come
market,
out
so
in scrutiny.
But like I say, we are a discussive council of ministers, and we are having robust discussions about all of this. But I say again, as soon as we get to the detail, and that's agreed, scrutiny will be the first to have it.
The Council of Ministers, are you confident that they were all happy with the Deputy Chief Minister's statement?
Well, I don't know, because I haven't spoken to every one of the Council of Ministers, and I know some of the Council of Ministers agree with some of what the Deputy Chief Minister wants to do and disagree with other aspects of it, and that's why we're having the discussions.
So you haven't picked up any signs of dissatisfaction from other ministers about the Deputy Chief Minister's
Not
statement?
directly, no.
That's strange, because we certainly have.
Fine.
Do you think it was a helpful contribution from the Deputy Chief Minister?
I don't think it was unhelpful, and like I say, it's sort of I'm not sure. There seems to be a sort of a bit of a rhetoric developing about this, when really I don't think there needs to be. The Deputy Chief Minister is working on a project that he feels strongly about, and he's following the democratic process with it through the Council of Ministers.
But he's lobbying in public for the money. That's essentially what that comes across
I
as.
disagree. He's not lobbying for the money. The £350 million figure is an estimate of his of what I guess it could cost if we were to do everything. I mean, if that's part of a pot of hundreds, thousands of millions of pounds we're going to spend over the next 5 or 10 years on infrastructure. So I'm sorry, but we have to disagree on that. And I just go back to the point that this is, I think, part of the democratic process around the Council of Ministers table. We're having tough discussions in these budget meetings because of the pressure on our finances. And that's the position. And as soon as we could agree, the Council of Ministers could agree with the majority of what Deputy Binet wants to do. They might agree with none of it. I'm not sure. We're not at that position yet, but we're having the discussions.
Would you be happy or content if other ministers came out with contrary positions in public during this process? Challenging, perhaps, at their view, in an equally
Hypothetical question. I can't really. I'd have to, I'd have to see.
Well, I think
what somebody
the
else
point
says,
is that you have essentially said there's nothing wrong with the Deputy Chief Minister going in the media and saying this is the money he wants. So Deputy Curtis's point is surely, well, it should be perfectly okay for other ministers to go and say, well, we disagree.
Well, like I say, it all depends. I can't judge what a minister might possibly say until they've said it. Then I'll give you my answer.
It's about the discipline around the process. How would you prefer the process to go from now onwards? Would you be welcoming of ministerial comments in the media?
I've always been welcoming of free speech. I've always been welcoming of ministers speaking directly to the media. And like I say, I think, trying to make more of this than is necessary. It's part of a good process that we're following around the Council of Ministers table. Deputy Morales announced today that he thinks private developers should be incentivised for building retirement villages didn't discuss that with any of the Council of Ministers, not a problem.
But it won't be going in the budget, Chief Minister, because it isn't public money.
But it could well be part of the Investing in Jersey programme.
But it's still private developers as an incentive. I think that is slightly different. I mean, from sorry.
The Project Breakwater, you said in January, would be published in March. it seems that discussions are still ongoing. Yeah. What's your comment on the sort of that process that's been ongoing now for probably 9 months?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. We thought we could announce something in March, and then June, I said, and after that, I said, look, I'm not going to, I think that you can probably guess from that it's fairly contentious. And discussions around Council of Ministers table are not fully supportive because, like I said, there's cost pressures, there's ministers wanting to look at other things in their portfolio. So that's why it's being delayed, because, we're talking about potentially diverting a lot of money into health services, digital services, preventative care. And that's why the discussions are ongoing, because we haven't reached a position yet.
The Deputy Chief Minister mentioned the possibility of either borrowing or taking from the reserve funds. Have any decisions been taken on those?
No, not yet. No.
When you announced in January that you were hoping to put proposals forward in March, you answered a question about why the Treasury Minister wasn't involved by saying that the Deputy Binner had formed a focused group so that he could move quickly. Do you sort of regret in a way that the Treasury Minister
Could you just
wasn't
remind me of
involved?
that? You've lost me on that one.
Your interview in January, you said you were asked why
Can I
the
just
Treasury...
say interview with where? With who?
the BBC.
Right, gosh, okay.
In January, you were asked about why the Treasury Minister wasn't involved. We just had a scrutiny hearing with the Treasury Minister, and she said she wasn't involved, and you were asked why that was. And you said that the need was to have a focused group and it would move more quickly that way. So do you regret, in retrospect, that the Treasury Minister wasn't involved from the beginning?
No, I mean, I think all of Council of Ministers have been aware of this since its conception. Treasury Minister is, as the plans have developed, the Treasury Minister almost has become far more involved, because it got to a stage where the plans were ready to say, right, this is what we plan to do, we'll bring it in for discussion.
Can you tell us exactly then how this process will work in terms of working out? There's two things to work out: how much money and where it will come from. What is going to happen to resolve those questions over the next 3 or 4 weeks?
Of my answer I keep repeating to, we can't say that until we know what is approved and how much money is required. It's all part of the process. Once we start agreeing that, then we can look at how we source the funding.
But I guess the challenge is the Deputy Chief Minister said we're open to talking about this in public now. And he didn't talk about it as such as he would like this. He talked about proposals to invest £350 million. So we would expect that there's a level of at least kind of certainty that number is viable, feasible, or even workable at this stage.
Well, it's again, whatever figure is brought forward, whatever is agreed for the Council of Ministers, that will be brought forward as part of the budget and go to scrutiny and for scrutiny. But until that's agreed...
Do you think that the Council of Ministers are close to an agreement on the budget? We've only got a few weeks to go.
Generally speaking, I think we're fairly close.
Are you confident that you can bring the team together to deliver a budget that they agree on?
The team is together just because the team disagree, the ministers disagree on certain issues. And I said before, I often welcome, we disagree, but it's never disagreeable. That's driven, deeper and more lengthy debate. Now, that can take us to the wire and things, and that's why we've been debating projects like Breakwater for some time, so we can try and find a consensus position to move forward with. And I think that's healthy.
I think we're happy to move on.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
You talked briefly about growth bids in your opening speech, and again,
Yes.
we heard in our quarterly meeting with the Treasury Minister that bids for revenue expenditure growth weren't being allowed at all, except for departments who were demonstrating their risks. Have there been any circumstances where you've justified a growth bid allocation so far?
Well, first of all, just to reiterate, Council Minister's priority or main commitment is curbing the growth in the public sector, and there was no bidding process for this budget. We've considered where funding may be needed to mitigate key tier 1 risks, health deficits, for example, and commitments made in the CSP. And so that's where we focused any growth bids to those areas. Because, as you know, in the past with growth bids, they tend to become an auction where we get hundreds of millions of pounds worth of requests coming forward that we just have no ability to fund. So that's why we've taken a slightly
Can you give us a
different approach.
specific example of a growth bid that has been approved?
Andrew.
Or
Do
is
you mean,
likely
do you
to
mean
be approved?
a growth bid or money to mitigate
A growth bid.
a corporate risk? A growth bid? No, I can't.
I don't think we can.
We've not got any.
Okay.
But it would be quite interesting to hear what you have approved in that other category.
Which other
Corporate
category?
risk.
The risk.
Oh, yeah, so the council and ministers are looking at probably, leaving to one side health deficit, which I think we've discussed before. They're looking at risk in two areas. One is within children's services and the other one is within fire and rescue. Those are the two areas the only two areas in that second category.
Okay, thank you. We also heard during questions without notice that the Minister for the Environment had been severely affected by the consultancy freeze. Can you provide an update on the impact of the consultancy freeze across government departments?
We'll start with the financial impact has been a reduction in 2024 of £29 million on 2023. So £29 million less was spent on consultancy in that. Yeah, can I hand over to Andrew and Paul now in relation to how that's impacted upon the logistics of the...
So yeah, that's the saving. The first part of the question, sorry, about is there a specific on the record comment from Deputy Luce?
I mean, he told us that the consultancy freeze had affected his department quite significantly. The question that was asked was in the context of, for example, the West of Ireland planning framework. So money was put into the budget as an amendment last year to conduct that this year. But due to the consultancy freeze, the minister, despite having the resources, despite having the money, hasn't been able to employ anybody to actually get on with what is an important task.
Well, certainly in that specific portfolio, I don't think there's been any restriction on his ability to progress his CSP commitments. I'm aware of two instances where he's made a consultancy request. One went through, one didn't. And obviously he's been dealing with very significant new investment to deal with PFAS, which wasn't in our budget, wasn't in our CSP, but we obviously, because of the nature of that issue, have found a way to support him. So I think it's a bit more balanced from my seat in the House, but I would say that as the person that has to approve these things. But that's, I don't know, Paul, if there's anything I've missed there.
No. What we've tried to do in relation to any kind of policy support or kind of the planning policy support is, as Chief Executive said, prioritise the Common Strategic Policy initiatives, and then they've still had money where it's actually been around can we achieve this, albeit slower. That's the type of consultancy that we have kind of clamped down on. So where it's about capacity rather than capability, it's the capacity ones that we try to reduce.
Does the Cabinet Office hold a list of specific projects that have actually been paused as a result of the freeze on consultancy services?
Not really. I mean, where there has been formal bids that have been rejected, yes, we could provide that, but that will be few and far between, because what it actually meant is policy officers and their ministers looking carefully at what they can achieve in this period, and particularly the outcome of that is the legislative programme. So in most policy support is related to the consultancy for legislation, and therefore you've got a legislative programme which is more realistic and affordable without using consultancy.
Deputy Luce said in the Assembly, I do not think it will come as a surprise to members of the Assembly that the consultancy freeze has affected my department quite significantly. And he went on, you just have to accept the fact that when you do things like stop using consultants, the amount of work you can get through in a specific amount of time is reduced, and in some cases significantly reduced. So do you accept that some of the things that ministers would like to do,
And indeed backbenchers would
back-
like to do.
which were passed by the Assembly,
There you go.
are not happening because of the consultancy freeze?
Yes, I accept that. But that's caveated by the fact that we had got ourselves in an unsustainable position with consultancy spending over £100 million a year of consultants alongside close to 50% increase in the headcount of the public sector. And something had to happen. And so that's why we have to focus on reprioritisation of spending and ask every single minister to do the same within their budgets. And there are going to be pressure points, unfortunately, but that's, I'm afraid, what we need to do to be fiscally responsible right now.
Thank you.
Minister, we've spoken already about Project Breakwater, but you've also referenced work on the wider Investing in Jersey initiative. So would you be in a position to update us on the progress of Invest in Jersey?
I'm pleased to say the Investing in Jersey programme is nearly complete, and like I say, I'd like to offer Scrutiny a private briefing as soon as next week, or as soon as Scrutiny is ready. I'm prepared to come along and do that. It's going to the next budget workshop, I think, which is next Thursday, just for the final sign-off. So that's the current position.
Is there anything, I see you've got a copy of perhaps
Yes.
a draft, is there anything you can share with us about ultimately what's in it and how the remit of it obviously is different to that of particularly Project Breakwater? Where are the
I
differences?
could just give you a flavour of it. I would say that, if I can quote from it, Jersey's infrastructure has served the island well for decades. However, like many jurisdictions with long-established public assets, we're now facing a combination of new pressures and overdue maintenance that require clear and coordinated response. Much of the core infrastructure is ageing and in some areas no longer fit for purpose. This includes roads, public buildings, education facilities, water drainage systems and flood defences. Meanwhile, our growing population, changing demographic profile, climate risks and shifts in how services are delivered all place additional demands on those systems. At the same time, despite increasing day-to-day public expenditure in recent years, long-term capital investments have not kept pace with need. This document outlines a proposed medium long-term investment strategy designed to address the challenges in a coordinated, sustainable and transparent manner. The strategy will be supported by a new capital investment fund, which will provide structured financial support for infrastructure renewal and development over the period 2026 to 2050. So that's sort of a flavour of what the investment programme tends to tackle.
Just to be clear then, Invest in Jersey is now completely separate from Project Breakwater.
Yes.
So Invest in Jersey is the long-term funding. Project Breakwater has these other elements that have been taken out of that project.
Well, they were always they were separate pieces of work, and what at some stage we thought, well, let's see if we can combine them on any areas of overlap. But then I think because of so much potential additional investment is required in health in relation to preventative care and digitisation of the health service, it was best to keep them. It was deemed best to keep them separate, so they didn't hold each other up as such. The Fort Regent project is sort of been announced and being managed now by the Regeneration Steering Group, and the markets are being discussed.
But is it part of Project Breakwater or is it part of Invest in Jersey?
Well, you could call it part of Project Breakwater if you wanted, but it's being managed wherever, however you do it. Jersey Development Company is managing the project, so I think it's sort of.
But it's very hard from this side of the table to understand the lines here, because if it's part of Project Breakwater, it's part of the 350 million that the Deputy
like I
Minister
say,
was talking about.
Yeah.
If it's part of Invest in Jersey, it's part of something that's already been agreed and is about to be signed off by.
When we agree what is called Project Breakwater, when we agree that, then we'll agree how everything is labelled, but that's not agreed at the moment, so.
And has ministerial responsibility been agreed for both of these? So who has ministerial responsibility for
Actually,
Invest in
legal
Jersey?
ministerial responsibility will stay with the individual minister for whatever piece of work, if it's a piece of work in relation to.
But how does that work with infrastructure projects when the Minister for Infrastructure won't be politically responsible for example,
well, it has to be.
That's clearly not what Deputy Binet envisages by his statement that he made.
I would disagree with that. I don't think he's call into that any juxtaposition with ministers. If the states agree to fund through the budgeting process something that falls within the remit of the infrastructure minister, then the infrastructure minister is legally responsible for that.
He might be legally responsible, but I guess the question is, where's the sponsorship from this coming from? Because we heard in the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure panel that the Minister for Infrastructure, and I will paraphrase, said something like, as long as I'm in office, I won't see the markets regenerated in the sense of a mass capital outlay. He thinks that there's a...
He might well be right, because there's a difference of opinion around the Council of Ministers table on that. Deputy Binet would like to see a far greater investment than the infrastructure minister is prepared to go with, and that's part of the difficult but welcome necessary discussions we have around the table.
Deputy Binet said on Monday that £220 million had been allocated for infrastructure needs such as the regeneration of Fort Regent, the town centre market and long-term commitment to European flights. So all I'm trying to establish here is Invest in Jersey, the thing that you say has been agreed and will be signed off by the Council of Ministers in the next few days, is Fort Regent and this stuff that Deputy Binet mentioned in Invest in Jersey, or is it in Project Breakwater, which you say is still not yet been decided at all, and still up for grabs?
I think I'm not going to get into these details now, because I can present them to you. I've just given you a flavour of what investing in Jersey around. Let's go through the detail of that based around a capital fund, the establishment of the capital fund.
I mean, can you understand our confusion, though, Chief Minister?
No,
we've had
really,
6 months of different messages being given to different scrutiny panels and different messages being given to the public. And I think Deputy
I still don't
understand.
understand.
Clarified we've got an Invest in Jersey project, but also we seem to have this sideline Project Breakwater, which also involves infrastructure in investment. So I'm going to pass back to you.
No, I mean, like the chair, I think it's just trying to work out how do we understand, and how do we know how to ask you the right questions about the work and what sounds like significant work your government's doing without ultimately a scrutiny turning up too late to the party, So we've got an option for a briefing on investing in Jersey as soon as we like, almost. Is that right?
Yes, pretty much so. And like I say, I need to get the final green light for Council of Ministers, which we're hoping to do next week. But I'm happy to update you, before that on the grounds it's not officially approved as yet. I'm prepared to share the detail on a confidential basis with you.
And can you clarify?
An in-principle agreement that we need to invest in infrastructure and maintenance, and particularly, and this was kind of Deputy Chief Minister's kind of strong steer, a surge of activity to kind of get Jersey kind of back on track, hence the health.
Predominantly based around the health service, yeah.
It's a surge of activity to kind of make Jersey healthier, more attractive place. That is, it was always a straw model. The principle has been agreed that there should be more investment. Chief Minister has described that. That's going through the budget process. As to what particular component parts you then fund is absolutely a point of discussion.
It just strikes me that the introduction that the Chief Minister has read out for Invest in Jersey bears significant resemblance to what you have just said about Project Breakwater.
Of course, because it's the principle.
So why
has
are
been
they
agreed.
separate?
So Project Breakwater, predominantly focused around the health service, very short term. Investing in Jersey is a 25-year programme, it's a much longer approach.
But it's not true. 220 million, more than half of the Project Breakwater that Deputy Chief Minister talked about was on infrastructure projects. 120 million was on health.
The rest of it was
Sport and sport.
Yes.
But
It's just we can't see what belongs in what.
no clarity.
When we're ready to share the detail, when it's been agreed, and if it was less contentious, we probably would have come and seen you before, but it's subject to detailed debate around the Council of Ministers.
What are your thoughts around the risk of the Council of Ministers actually not agreeing?
I'm sure consensus. I'm sure consensus will be found. We've got a really good record of finding middle ground. In most instances. In fact, I can't think of one where we haven't, and we'll take a democratic decision on it.
I
Residential
can give an
tenancy law?
example of the residential tenancy.
That's probably one. Yeah.
Clearly, one of your ministers referred to his colleagues as cowardly politicians playing dirty tricks. I think that's a significant example of disagreement, and I think from what we're hearing here, I think there's a possibility of disagreement around this, and yet we're expecting a budget to be lodged on September the 3rd.
It's quite possible council ministers won't accept any part of it. That's a possibility.
And what will be your way forward through that if your council don't agree?
Well, we move forward, don't we? We move forward, we accept the democratic decision, just as if the decision is to do some of it.
And so the idea would be that it would be argued out through the Assembly, and you'd be coming to the Assembly with a budget that's not agreed unanimously by your council.
No, the budget will be agreed. We're not going to present a budget that's not agreed.
So the two options are that you agree this and it goes into the budget, so you have unanimous agreement.
What's agreed will go in the budget. If we agree some of what Deputy Benet would like us to agree, it will go in the budget. If we don't agree any of it, none of it will go in the budget. If we agree all of it will go in the budget.
You won't end up with a situation like with the RTL, where you have a common strategic policy that doesn't end up being supported by the majority of the council ministers.
The retail
Residential
law, I believe, is supported by the majority of the council ministers, but a number of ministers and assistant ministers have lodged there what we call an agreement to differ, because they're fundamentally opposed to aspects of it. Now, the housing minister this is part of the work he's been doing for some time. I think we all probably agree, I hope we all agree, I certainly agree, that we need to approve the principles, because we need to make some improvements in the law to protect further both tenants and landlords.
And just check whether the Assistant Chief Minister thinks
Well,
we should
he
approve
doesn't.
the-
You know he doesn't agree because he voted against it. Well, we voted defer it ultimately, which is fine because he's been open and honest with council and ministers, as the other ministers have, and that's why we've managed to retain a cohesive council and ministers, because we're, I think, realistic around the table. We are effectively a non-partisan assembly, a representative coalition of states members, and we've adopted a very pragmatic approach to the democracy there. And if on occasion we don't agree, then so be it.
Is this coalition government proving more challenging than you expected, Chief Minister?
Well, it's challenging, but to be honest, I think it's possibly less challenging than governments I've been involved with in the past. But it's still challenging, but I'm still enjoying the job.
I think budget processes are always difficult. I think the difference that we've got this time is, as difficult as it gets, people are continuing to speak to each other, continuing to have conversations and being open and honest.
Yep.
And whilst it does get tense, it doesn't trip over the line into being oppressive.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, that we can have open discussion.
And we can finish a meeting, we're going to have a cup of tea afterwards, isn't it?
Shall I hand you back to
And we can move on to a new topic, which is digital services.
Right.
Chief Minister.
Excellent.
Phew.
So, in your ministerial response to our review of the budget 2025 to 28, and as mentioned in our previous quarterly hearings, it was advised that we would be seeing a published digital strategy in June. Could you update us on its publication?
Jason.
I can give you an update on that, Deputy Curtis. The technology strategy was approved by the Executive Committee and the Council of Ministers in June. I'm going through a series of presentations to stakeholders. I'm working with the communications team on a public release of that at summary level. I've offered a private hearing to Public Accounts Committee, which I think is scheduled for end of July. There's some commercial sensitivity to the strategy, so it's not appropriate to talk about it fully in the public domain. It's progressing very well. I had strong endorsement from Council and Ministers, strong support. They asked me some great questions on how they could help and support some of the challenges. So we're very pleased with the progress, and we were very pleased we hit our deadline that we promised for end of June.
Well, I think we're hoping for it to be published as well soon.
When can we expect publication?
publication will be during August for it. I don't have a precise date yet. I'm working with Martin White on that and his team.
I note the change of language, and it was in the response, your ministerial response to recommendation 46 that described it as a digital strategy, and now it's a technology strategy. Is it possible to understand the terminology change?
Absolutely. Essentially, a digital strategy is what the departments, what the government public services are needed for, driven by the departments. And this follows our earlier discussions on project prioritisation. I've discussed at length with the other chief officers on their needs from a digitisation perspective. And we have a plan to develop and improve some of the digital strategies for the departments towards the end of the year. Practical example, digital education strategy is clear but needs some updates, and that's been planned for the back end of the year. The second example would be the digital health strategy that's being developed and worked on, relates to some of the points just discussed under breakwater for some of the ambition with digital health. So we looked at the assessment, we looked at the challenges that I presented at the last private hearing on the health check of IT and technology, and we're focusing on resilience. The resilience of our systems is not where it should be, with some of the ageing systems that we've talked about previously. So the focus is on resilience, improving service levels from a citizen perspective, creating stability in our systems. In other words, the underlying technology is the issue today, not the demand on what we need to change from a digitisation perspective. So that's what the focus has been, and that's why we did an extensive exercise last year, prioritising the projects through the departments.
Okay. I think a lot of the public expect to see perhaps digital services change at the rate they see in the private sector, which may or may not be possible, but of course that means sometimes replacing the services people use to interface with government differently. Is that captured by this technology strategy? So replacing forms with web page, web apps and all that kind of, the kind of the customer experience side that I think people were hoping for in a digital strategy.
At the principal level, yes. It very much talks about improved automation, better cost effectiveness, better use of some of the tooling that we have. The underlying issue is what's just been talked about with money. Some of our systems are 30 years old, some 25 years, some 19 years. There's many, many old systems that we need to replace, and we've had to make some difficult decisions on the priorities.
On those,
I think
go
an
on.
important point here is one of the things I think public version of the strategy will do is deal with the point you just made, which is everyone, you're right, because of their use of their handheld devices, because of what they're doing in their homes, never mind in private workplaces. I think everyone's maybe assuming a level of agility and modernity in our systems that isn't quite there. So I think one of the things we need to do to rebase everyone through it, which is why Jason's patiently going through these stakeholder groups and private sessions with politicians. I think everyone needs to understand the machine that's underneath us and what we have to spend in that machine to keep it upright. And that's really important because your ability to digitise and to deal with some of the issues which you've mentioned, which are very frustrating for islanders, in our case is to some extent compromised because we've got a legacy of hundreds of systems. We had a legacy, a culture in government of everyone doing their own thing, which means that we've got this Byzantine empire, as you know, of systems between health, education, everyone else that don't speak to each other. And we'd love to just start again, but the money ain't there to start again. And the risks of trying to start again are too high when ultimately everything depends on the government to keep the island running. So what we're trying to do is traverse our way through these old systems, bring that modernity in a risk-adjusted way, but it won't be what people experience in the software that they're accessing in their private lives, or it certainly won't have the agility. So I think it's just important everyone understands that. And the biggest thing from this strategy is not whether we'll have systems that make people's tea for them. It will be everyone understanding how the island actually runs from a technology perspective and what the art of the possible is.
So it will ensure that the
spirit of our systems, that is antithetical to the culture of government as it's prevailed in Jersey for the last 50 years. And you saw that during OneGov and the visceral reaction to OneGov. So We can certainly make it less risky and more resilient, which is what the strategy will do. There's still some political debates to be had about whether you're willing to submit to that level of central control.
But the argument just presented is, by not submitting earlier to more central control, we are now battling a sprawling network of systems. So it sounds like there's advice coming from the department, from the expertise, saying centralisation is, simplification is essential if we want to deliver better services.
It's not centralisation because you want to control services. It's just in the world that we now live in with cyber risk and other things, we probably need to strike a better balance than we have in the past. And that's one of the debates that needs to be had. It's a democratic debate.
I'll give you one example of that to build on Andrew's point. As you know, Deputy Curtis, we've discussed it at private hearings, that the technology strategy, the architecture is in layers. The core network, the core data management and some of the service providers, that is agreed, that's centralised. We have a centralised approach, model, architecture and service provider for our network. Essentially, it's the same with cyber security and cyber control. So where some of the departments would like some more autonomy, there is no disagreement on who manages the network, the standards we use, the policy we use. The secondary agreement is we need more clearer IT policies to direct the departments where they want some autonomy. Great progress in that, and the strategy will lay that out, as you'll see.
Can I just ask a question on that? I mean, the digital has a history of spending a lot of money and not appearing to achieve what it sets out to achieve. Do you feel you're on top of that now, and that we are spending money in a worthwhile way that the public will see improvements?
Yes. We did a lot of work last year with the Executive Committee and with the Council of Ministers on prioritising the projects. I think the word digital and technology is sometimes confused with business change management, business process management, cultural management. So if you look at the details of some of these projects and programmes in the past that have been disappointing, not delivered all the benefits, it's not actually the technology spend, it's often the process change, the cultural change for it. And if you look at the percentage of spend of the actual technology to project management and program management and change management, my personal opinion, using lots of audits and reviews, is that our approach to managing these projects is what needs to be tightened. It's not the technology per se. Occasionally we make a mistake and we choose the wrong technology, but it's the management of it and the control of it.
Okay, we're going to have to move on. I've got one more question, though, which relates to a kind of a cross-cutting theme that the Children, Education and Home Affairs panel have been looking into in their review of online harms. One area is the concept of digital safety by design. So perhaps, Chief Minister, are you aware of digital safety by design as a principle and whether we as a government are incorporating these concepts into policy making?
Well, we are, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong notes. We are completely alive to the threats, potential dangers, and also the challenges of actually controlling young people's access. You know, there's an element of being realistic about it. And that's, we're working on ways we might be able to address that now. Other jurisdictions have started with certain ideas, but we are committed to finding some solutions that will improve the situation and provide greater protection to young people and internet to access. But it's a huge challenge, as you know, because it's not just about banning phones in schools, it's about...
And our digital services working with the digital economy policy team on staying abreast of where the policy side is going.
Yes, basically, Jason.
Yes, a member of my team is on the steering committee for that programme.
Yeah.
Just one thing, sort of slightly to tangent to that, but I think it's relevant. You know, the UK Online Safety Act comes into play in the 25th of July. We chose not to go down that route because we wanted to develop our own online safety harms legislation. Where are we with that?
Yeah, so there's a number of things we're looking at. Firstly, when the law comes in the UK, we'll see what impact it actually has in the real world. But secondly, we're looking at the provisions within the data protection legislation, which takes a bottom-up rather than a top-down approach. So where people can get images quickly removed if it's their own images that they don't want people to see on the internet. And of course, that cures part of the problem, but it doesn't stop the problem of particularly young people, seeing content which is really inappropriate. So I think we'll have a blended approach. We will develop in the future some sort of legislation which is akin to the Online Safety Act without it extending to Jersey, and we'll have the bottom-up approach of empowering more people to use the data protection legislation so that they can get images removed.
But given that the other Crown dependencies have extended that legislation, what would be the risk for us of just deciding perhaps that was a bad mistake, bad decision? Let's just take it on.
There's always a risk, but I think we need to look at the experience from those other countries and what the real impact that it has in the real
But
world.
why, when the other Crown dependencies are plunging in?
They are, but we don't know what impact that will have, whether it will be a positive impact or not. So we need to learn from that experience, but in the meantime, put in our own provisions as well, which we're committed to do.
What timetable do you have for that, given that the UK and the other Crown dependencies will have this
It's
in
in
place?
the legislative programme, so it will be before the run out of this term, the data protection side.
The data protection side.
Yeah.
Perhaps if I may, we've discussed this. Is a cross-cutting policy area, as you might imagine, economy and children's policy and digital and data protection, as you say. There will be a degree of protection from a kind of an umbrella effect of the UK legislation in terms of kind of those international websites. But actually, the real benefit of Jersey is that you should be able to get a few kind of industry players around the table and kind of agree to make some of these changes for the customers' benefits. I think too often we kind of reach for that legislation lever, but actually if we use our convene lever, which is what the Chief Minister's asked us to do, we could get the key people around the table and agree a different approach.
I'm actually a member of that panel. And,
Yes, of course.
obviously, we've just come to the end of our public evidence, but there will be some recommendations around how decisions are made to include or not include permissive extent clauses for this sort of thing. Thank you. We're going to move on now to people services. One of our kind of priorities, I guess, when we took over from the previous scrutiny panel was just to keep an eye on what was done for the people services review. So the first area was occupational health, and I just wondered if you could give us an update on the transition to the new occupational health service.
Yeah. So we're still going out to procurement. So the existing provider still remains in place. What we're going to be doing during that ensuing period is looking at how we can have more effective provision locally, whilst looking at what provision we need to look for extending to the UK. Because one thing that comes clear from people that use the services is they want something immediate and they want something that they can relate to because it's locally based. So we're assessing the landscape to see what provision is available locally and how that can best fit, and then equally what provision we'll need to extend further afield.
Okay, have you got a timescale on that then,
Yep,
please?
so it's next year, middle of next year. Before the middle of next year, we will be in a position to move the service forward.
And are we hearing that it's going to be a blend then? Of
Yes,
lo-
it'll be a
local and
blended
Ireland and
approach
the
of on and off.
national, because we do have some expertise on Ireland, don't we?
Yeah,
in occupational
absolutely.
health? Okay. In terms of talent management, recruitment and retention, what steps are being taken to manage the retention of professional people who have raised grievances, either through whistleblowing or line management, to mitigate the impact of losing some really highly qualified resources and skills?
So we are reviewing our whistleblowing and grievance procedures. We've got a system called NavX, which is a reporting system where people can completely anonymously report their concerns or what's happened to them. And there's firewalls to make sure that, only the right people get access to that information. So that's a really important part of the process, that people can feel free to speak up anonymously. And what we're trying to embed is that openness and transparency and safeguarding runs throughout the organisation.
And how is that going to mitigate the impact of losing professional people?
So one of the really important things that we do is exit interviews, and even those can be done online so that we can assess the impact and where it's gone wrong. and make provision to put it right if someone has lost their job inappropriately or they should have been covered by the whistleblowing policy. So there is lots of safeguards to make sure that that doesn't happen and that we learn from that experience.
When grievances are not appropriately resolved to the satisfaction of the employee, how are you mitigating the reputation on the public sector? And is this a cause for concern?
So we have restorative practice. So if we have grievances that are unresolved by any of the parties, then we would look to do restorative practice. So mediation, for instance, we would try and do that in the first instance in any event, because that's really important. So we do have a number of measures that we can do to try and resolve these matters. Ideally, we wouldn't want anybody to leave the organisation as a result of this. So we would do anything we can to either potentially move them within the organisation. We're a big, government, public service in different departments. So we would always try and retain members of staff, accepting that in some circumstances that may not be possible.
A particular example, reputationally, was the educational psychology service, where the National Association said that Jersey was not a safe place for educational psychologists to work. Can you give us any update? Has that situation now been resolved?
So we have now had the Charles Bernard review. We have an action plan now in terms of all of the recommendations. They've been shared with the educational psychologists, but also the association. We have continuous conversations with the association, and they are going back to the board, I believe, at the end of this month with those recommendations and the action plan, and hopefully that restriction will be removed.
Okay, so are you confident that we will have a back to normal educational psychology service?
In September,
That's
yes.
certainly the aim.
Does the government still use non-disclosure agreements as part of any compromise?
We do, yeah, that can form part of the way that people progress, because they decide that on balance they don't want to go to tribunal, and a non-disclosure agreement and a payoff, for want of a better word, is the end product that we arrive at.
Okay, and are you keeping a close eye on the UK legislation and the UK practice around the removal of non-disclosure agreements?
So, yeah, and there are some restrictions on non-disclosure agreements when it comes to certain things that have happened in the workplace in relation to sexual harassment in particular, which the UK is looking at the moment. My view is that that should a non-disclosure agreement should never be invoked when there is that allegation in place. So once we get the experience from the UK and they implement that, it's very likely that we will be putting something very similar in place.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to talk about the recent media over government headquarters.
Yeah.
Have you received any feedback from employees at the new government headquarters about access to the building?
Yeah, so what I'd like to say is I've reviewed that email, and whilst I think it was well intended, it is certainly not the government policy that children are not allowed in the building. I think it was, to be fair, it was written probably in haste for a particular one set of circumstances. So if I can just talk through what the policy is. On the ground floor and on the first floor, children are welcome. There are safe areas for them. If parents or mothers are breastfeeding, there's safe lockable areas if they want that privacy. But on balance, we need to be flexible, of course, because we are a family-friendly employer. But if a parent has childcare responsibilities in an emergency situation, there are lots of options available to them. They can either work from home, they can take emergency leave. So, bringing a child into an office is kind of not the default position, but we will accommodate it where we have to. If you look at most workplaces, most children would not be able to come into a workplace. We have other floors where it's not appropriate to take children. firstly because of the work that's going on there, because of confidentiality, because of health and safety. But we certainly do have more than adequate provision on those first 2 floors, or the ground floor and the first floor, where children are welcome.
So are you going to put out
Yeah.
another missive to...
So what I'm going to do after this hearing, I'm going to ask Leslie, between us, we'll draft something which is more appropriate and tells the reality of what the policy is.
I know, thank you very much for that response, because obviously it came up in the family-friendly review and everybody sort of went, oh.
That's right.
Just a minor matter, but again about transparency and openness, this scrutiny panel have been trying to get a copy of that email all week from government, and our requests have been either rejected or ignored, so we actually had to take a copy from Bailiwick yesterday. So
if you could have asked me, I would have seen.
The scrutiny governmental process seemed to have broken down somewhat.
I'd have happily got that to you.
In terms of courtesy there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's really good to hear.
If we return to the common strategic policies for a moment, you have 13. Are they on track for delivery?
Yeah, every single one. Some are complete. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Some are complete. Every single one is on track. The final start date for the new build at Overdale is still to be agreed, but it's getting closer. Good progress is being made there, but otherwise every single one's on track.
The RTL is not included in that, presumably.
So the priority in the CSP that relates to, is in the provision of more affordable homes for islanders and more confidence for the rental sector. That's a priority. So it is connected to that, and we'll wait to see what the states decide on when it comes back in, I think, September. Yeah.
Have ministers raised any concerns in relation to the delivery of their CSP priorities, and in particular in relation to their business as usual work as well? So are there pinch points?
Not that I'm aware of. I think just looking through the list, we've made really good progress. I mean, there are some always challenges, but generally, as far as I'm aware, all ministers are content with the progress. I've not had one minister discuss with me any issues they have.
Can you state clearly what your expectations are about the role and obligation ministers have to support the common strategic policy?
Well, it was approved by the Assembly. So as Ministers and States members, I think we have responsibility to support it. But of course, if there are any new information comes to light, any changes in circumstances which might cause deviation from that. If you look at the residential tenancy law, whilst I'd like to think most ministers support, I'd like to think all ministers support the provision of more affordable homes and more confidence for the rental sector, there are aspects of the rental tenancy law proposals they're not happy with, nameless periodic, for example, periodic tenancies and rent caps. Those are the two most contentious issues. So there will always be, when it gets down to the finer detail, some areas of disagreement.
And you do that through your agreement to differ policy?
We have an agreement to differ, yeah.
Does it worry you that that is essentially a kind of a consequence-free method for ministers to simply disagree with whatever they want?
But it's in practice it doesn't work out like that. First of all, I don't agree with that. I think it's a mature, responsible and pragmatic way to deal with differences in a system that does not have the doctrine of collective responsibility. I am not able to say to ministers, you will, and I'm often not inclined, because I believe in a technically non-partisan system, democracy, and basically when we have areas where the council and ministers don't agree, such as the tendency, what the agreement to differ does is ultimately shift the decision on some occasions to the Assembly. So a democratic decision will always be made, and it might be that when council and ministers can't agree, the Assembly will agree and make the decision. And I think that's appropriate, and I think it's sensible and pragmatic in the type of democracy we have here.
I think the difference within the common strategic policies is it is something that ministers sat down and thrashed out amongst themselves. So it feels strange to find such massive divisions having opened up within the Council of
I think
Ministers
that's
after the event.
If I can respectfully say that's a gross exaggeration. We don't have massive divisions. I can't,
On the
unless you know,
residential
unless
tenancy.
there's
No, on the
something-
residential tenancy.
Oh,
law, I mean.
okay, fine. I say, do we have massive divisions? The divisions I think we have are largely around the rent cap and the periodic tenancy. Yeah. And so are they massive decisions? They're differences.
Deputy Johnson.
Yeah, sorry, just coming on the residential tenancy law. I mean, I think the distinction we're making is that the common strategic policy is regarding the principles. Yes, we do accept that individual ministers might have resistance to rent cap, whatever, but could that not have been accommodated by supporting the principles in the first place? I mean, where is the distinction, or why didn't ministers, the ministerial team, follow the common strategic policy on that point and reserve their objection to the later?
We didn't have a vote on the principles because the principles were deferred. I forget the mechanism Deputy Gardner used.
We didn't have a vote, but various ministers said they would not vote for it.
So the Assembly voted on a reference back. There was no vote on the principles. I happen to believe that if we had gone to a vote on the principles on the day, they would have been approved.
But several of the ministers, including the Assistant Chief Minister, would have voted against the principles.
Perhaps you'd like you sitting next to me.
Yeah. I think politics is about compromise, and sometimes you need to encourage people to compromise, and that was one of the mechanisms which was available. And broadly, there wasn't enough in there for me to vote for the principles. But it doesn't mean that we've got to that end point yet. So we've got a whole summer to keep discussing it and to keep finding a proper solution, which, you know, we started doing around the Council of Ministers table, but you can't always get to that end point. Sometimes we need to thrash it out in the Assembly, as the Chief Minister has said. So
I think this is the other side of the coin, isn't it? So Deputy Enif was asking about the obligation of ministers to support the CSP. But Chief Minister, from each minister, there are CSPs in which a minister leads. So the RTL is led by the Minister for Housing. To what extent do you see it as his responsibility to in essence, ensure that what he brings forward does gain the support of ministers before, again, it's thrashed out at the table? And do you think that was done sufficiently? Because
first of all, can I say the detail of the RTL is not referenced in the CSP. The CSP is at a higher level about supporting more affordable homes and more security for tenants. So you could argue, actually, without the rent cap and without the periodic tenancies, the rest of the law does provide more security for tenants. Sorry, could you just repeat the?
Well,
So yes, and I think the retail tenancy law was discussed 5 or 6 times at council and ministers, and the majority of council and ministers did approve it at that stage. But at the same time, a number of ministers said they were doubtful whether they could support the whole thing, and we agreed on the process we follow, which is agreement to differ, and the various reasons, and that's the position we find ourselves in. And the housing minister has said, I'll accept the decision of the Assembly. If the Assembly rejected or parts of it, we go with what we can.
Thank you. Just moving on now to the Control of Housing and Work law. We passed the amended law in April 2025, and we were expecting regulations to come into force, expected for lodging this year. So can you update us on the progress of the timeline for lodging and when the panel can expect to be engaged from a scrutiny perspective on the orders and the guidance?
Paul, could you provide?
Yes, so I would expect you to be briefed by Deputy Alves in the autumn, and at the moment we're looking at an appointed day act of January.
Okay, and we were told back in March that the orders would pretty much be a carbon copy of what exists now.
Yes.
Is that still the case?
Yes, as when it went through the House, it was, as you know, 2 updates, rather arcane legislation, but also arcane terminology, changing registered to standard and such. So yes, that's the idea.
Thank you. Is there any further policy work being undertaken, and do you anticipate bringing forward any other changes by regulation for the states during this government term?
There sort of to maybe changes in relation to the categories of employment that can receive licensed lease accommodation, but I'm sure Deputy Ellis will brief you on that as well.
Okay, and also can you brief us on any work underway to consider the modern remote working practices on the housing and work controls?
I don't think there's any plans for that in regulations at present. We'll check.
During this term, so the kind of the digital nomad stuff
Yes,
is
I don't believe
kind of
so,
all-
but we can check, and I'm sure she'll talk to you about
Okay,
it.
thank you very much.
Okay, Minister, during the quarterly hearing in March, you noted the population policy is one of your main challenges that you wish to address. So with that in mind, what steps have you taken since March to progress this work stream?
Well, it's moved swiftly up since the publication of the latest figures. We're aware of the demographic challenge because they're outlined in the Sustainable Economic Plan previously. And I think the falling birth rate, the fact that that's continuing not just here but in other jurisdictions, has now accelerated this to a higher area of priority, and that's why I'm encouraging as many members as possible to join next week, because we will be focusing on the population challenges at the All States Members Workshop. And as I said before, I'd like these workshops to help us shape policy moving forward. We're still exploring the statistics and policy implications for birth rates and working age population. We can't attribute the downward trend in birth rates to any one thing specifically. We do suspect, and there is evidence that it's, a large part of it is linked to cost of housing, cost of living, cost of nursery fees, provision, affordability around having the family. But of course, families now are working differently. Women, families are generally starting later, marriages are later. There's all sorts of statistics, people wanting to travel, more empowerment for women in society, wanting to follow careers, so there's a whole lot of issues.
Do you think confidence in our maternity services is a factor as well?
That's not something that particularly raised itself so far. I wouldn't think so.
Come our way. No, as the Chief Minister said, you've got it right across the Western world. We're in a generation now where more women went to higher education. Therefore, it's understandable that the age of which they're starting to have children becomes later, because they want to maximise the career benefits of that. And then there's two consequences to that. One is a trend for smaller families, because by definition the time period is shorter. And the second is clearly grandparents are also older. There's a kind of intergenerational childcare issue going on there as well. So we are going to get into this in detail on Tuesday. For any members that can join us, it's a key section of one of the roundtables.
I presume since March, given the focus on this, work's been done to form ideas, form policy. Just back to kind of my first question, where's your focus been since March in building policy, in understanding the issue, in what's changed?
So the key thing is the same as the last Council of Ministers address, which is you've got an ageing population, you've got the dependency ratio widening, and we need to find ways to encourage working age population to be maximised through participation, but also to kind of look at where we can make sure Jersey is attractive for kind of migrant workers, because we do need significant numbers of them. Within that kind of first cohort though, of kind of maximising the existing islanders, of course, pronatal policies, as you might call them, are are an issue. Our problem has been...
I haven't heard that side of it.
in policy terms, that's what it's called. And because there's a good evidence base of kind of Scandinavian countries and kind of many Western countries, France, Italy, trying to address this through tax levers, through childcare, through housing,
Addressing the gender pay gap.
size of housing, exactly. IVF. The main problem with this, though, is that very few, if any, are actually working, and there's no return on investment for very considerable sums. So you might be able to make some changes, but actually you're dealing with cultural issues and generational issues here.
Can I just, I'll move also more specifically, Deputy Curtis asked what's happened, and I think we know that a lower birth rate will have a limited impact in 2 or 3 decades' time on the number of adults of working age, but at its peak, the birth rate's only provided plus 400 per annum babies, where we need to reach plus 700 for, making sure the working age population...
That's 700 babies a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no, you need a working age population of at least... So the overall population needs to grow by about between 325 extra and plus 700 extra in order to have the same amount of dependency ratio. That's the rationale. But
So you could say alongside that, an ageing population will create greater demand for healthcare and social support in the future ahead of the challenges faced by the birth rate. And actually, the housing big aspect of the investing in Jersey and the long-term capital planning, the catalyst of which were the oncoming challenges of working age population and falling birth rate. And you'll have that explained to you when the detail comes out about the provision of affordable homes, accommodation for workers and retirement.
I think Deputy Renniff has got one to jump in, but I have one more, which Mr. O'Malley said. We know we need significant numbers of migrant workers. Is that written down as kind of a fact and understanding? Because, part of a population policy is understanding the levers and understanding what Jersey looks like, and its demographic composition of age, of work, is this taken as a government policy that we need more migrant workers?
It's under discussion. I mean, I think one of the advantages of our the levers we have around population is just when we were worried about population growing too much, we slowed down immigration and who we let in and the conditions. We can turn the dial the other way slightly, and it could be that in the years ahead we might allow more younger families to come and live and work here. And so it's a flexible population policy that we're discussing at the moment. But like I say, we can always refine that in as we move forward in line with the demands and the challenges we face.
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously done some thinking about this. Jersey has a replacement ratio of a birth rate of around 1.2, doesn't it, at the moment? Mm-hmm. Is there anywhere in the world that you have found with a lower birth rate?
the lower birth rate, South Korea is about 0.7. For example, France is heading that way. But what you've got in most of those jurisdictions is a whole country of kind of different ethnicities and everything going on. You've got a very small kind of cohort here that we can measure differently. Israel is one of the only ones that's actually backing the Western trend. They're up to about 3.
But what I mean by precursor question in a way is to try and understand what lessons we might learn.
Yes.
From places which are in a similar...
Exactly, so we have been doing that work.
It's a good point, and one doesn't want to be Jeremiah, but the team have looked a lot at the prenatal policies, and the evidence of them working is close enough to 0, we'll call it 0, so lots of things have been tried. Hungary claims to be working, but some question marks over the empiricism.
The incentives.
That study. So if we look at it in democracies and what's been tried, lots of things that people think would be obvious things to try have been tried, but the results haven't been heartening. The only country that's turned things around from a very low base is Japan, we need to understand a little bit more about that, but a lot of that's around childcare provision and so forth. But it's whether it's going to be comparable to us at the moment, the research isn't encouraging.
So I wasn't just thinking about the incentives, I was thinking about the understanding of the reasons.
Oh,
Because if you understand the reasons,
Yes.
then you can withdraw barriers rather than provide incentives, if you see what I mean.
So what I described in the first, in terms of generational, this is a generation that is, across the world is more likely to come to higher education than the generation before. That is a significant issue that, in the evidence, seems to have affected a number of different countries.
I mean, broadly, you can have factors like that which you can't change, but you have other factors around cost of bringing up children and so on, which you can change. So I'm interested in the extent to which we understand what weighting applies to these different factors.
Yes. But as the Chief Executive said, we've explored those pronatal in other jurisdictions, and you've got, in some cases, 10, 20 years worth of evidence. They haven't been able to actually have an effect.
Thank you. I think it'll be really interesting actually on Tuesday as well. It'll be good to have a follow-up after that for members who can't attend. Is the session going to be recorded?
We didn't last time.
No.
I'm going to hand you to Conor Johnson now, who's going to ask you about complaints.
Yes, thank you. Before I ask my questions, may I apologise for not being here at the outset due to appearing in court on a parochial support matter.
Thank you for the clarification.
It's on complaints handling. There's been a public consultation process, and we understand that the final proposals are due to be delivered to Chief Minister by July 2025. Have you yet received those proposals, and are they still on track?
Yes, I've had an interim update, I think towards the end of June, from Deputy Scott, who is in the process of completing her work. I must say she's done what appears to be a very thorough piece of work. And so proposals for an ombudsman will be brought to or whether we go with an ombudsperson or not. Imminently now, I think that could be end of July, August time. But I'm expecting a further update from Deputy Scott imminently.
So will a proposal from her go to us, the public?
Yeah, so
By the end of the month?
proposal will be presented, which I'm quite happy to share with Scrutiny, and it will go to Council of Ministers. Now, I mean, the logistics of that a bit different because we've got a number of budget workshops and Council of Ministers planned between now and September. So I anticipate it will be fitted into one of those, and a decision will be made. And as I said, we'll either make a decision to move forwards towards an ombudsperson or not. And if we don't, we said we come back to the States with that.
Yeah.
Based on it.
What's your general view regarding the consultation undertaken and the consultation outcome? Was it robust enough? Did it pay enough attention to previous decisions of the States and the Law Commission, for instance?
Well, I believe so. You know, I haven't seen the actual numbers of returns around the consultation, but I think Deputy Scott has worked collegiately with relevant stakeholders to produce a good piece of work that's complete enough for us to make a good decision. Paul, do you want to just? You've been working closely on that.
Just to echo that, there's been no reported issues with the methodology, and because there's been a good weight of discussion over the years, Deputy Scott was able to kind of start from quite a high base. So it's more about what to do with that.
Yeah, and whilst it's wrong to focus on any particular decision, there has been a recent one which was not to the liking of the Minister concerned, who refuted its findings. Does that not summarise the basic problem we have, that the present system we have has not really been acted on by ministers and perhaps hasn't got therefore the respect that it deserves?
Well, I think you could point to a number of deficiencies in the existing system. You could also point to a number of areas where I think it's been reasonable. I think what we're looking to now is what we have. Is that adequate for today's society and the challenges we face?
Okay. Right. Well, we look forward to receiving the proposal, but how will it be presented within the budget? given our amendment to last year's budget regarding establishment of the Ombudsman.
Well, it depends on, I'm not sure what's being proposed, so it depends on the cost of what's being proposed, and then we'll look at I guess we'll look at the cost of what we've got at the moment and look at reprioritisation of our budget from elsewhere too.
And is it your intention, as you indicated before, that there will be a standalone debate on the matter rather than coming within the budget debate?
Only a standalone debate if the Council of Ministers decide not to go with an ombudsperson, because that would be contravention to a previous state's decision.
So that would be a rescindment.
Yeah, you'd have
Yes.
to rescind it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So we'll
Even
either
though
be-
not every state's decision has been rescinded in the past, we do it this time.
But to be absolutely clear, there will either be a budget line for whatever is being proposed, or there will be a rescindment proposition.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Just to pick up over independent Jersey Care Inquiry matters, can you just update us on the progress of the work stream and whether any legacy projects remain outstanding?
Malcolm,
The plaque is something which is still outstanding. So again, we're just working with care leavers to get the wording right and to decide on the correct location. So as you probably saw, we were in a shape to unveil it, and there was some negative opinions which we've got to listen to. So we're going back out to those stakeholder groups, and it's quite hard because they don't speak with one unified voice, but we have to find something which is going to be acceptable to the majority. So the likelihood is we'll change the wording slightly, and we may seek to place it somewhere like the Place to Remember, which might be a more appropriate place for a public apology. But we're still in discussions on those.
Where is the Place to Remember?
Oh, so that's at the gardens at Hard Dipper. So there's a little sort of a water feature and a little sheltered area where people can go in quiet contemplation. And
So it's unlikely to be going on the wall at Picket House in the
I
Royal
think
Square.
we're not completely decided. It's still a possibility, but there was some negative media, social media attention.
I think bottom line is some victims don't want an apology, they don't want a reminder, and some do, and we're trying to sort of, find the best way.
To navigate it.
Yeah.
And are there any other outstanding areas? It's just work filtered into sort of work in business as usual now.
Exactly. Children's Day is embedded in what we do every year. Fantastic event last Sunday.
One of the recommendations of the Independent Jersey Care Inquiry was obviously the formation of the Children's Commissioner, the Office of the Children's Commissioner. Have you got any thoughts around how the budget is going to be allocated for the Office of the Children's Commissioner? Are they going to be subject to a reduction in budget?
So that is the way that the budget works is the allocations are made to the head of expenditure, so the Cabinet Office level, and then decisions will be made with ministers as to how you apportion that within that. So that it's a decision that has to be made yet.
Okay. And is that likely to remain the same, or is it likely to be reduced?
We are likely to continue to reduce the size of the Cabinet Office. It doesn't necessarily follow that the Children's Commissioner will be asked to make
I'll be clear, there are no plans to reduce the budget of
The
Children's Commissioner at this stage.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, well, hand you over to...
The International Cultural Centre, I don't know who wants to take this in the absence of Deputy Ayres, but can you update us on the progress on the International Cultural Centre?
Yeah. So the International Cultural Centre is actually an individual rather than a place or a building. So we're going to be employing a person where that might best fit, might be with an existing provision, perhaps in somewhere like the Salvation Army, or perhaps that it needs to be placed in Union Street itself, because I think the feedback that we've been getting from some people who live in the island who are from different cultural backgrounds is there's a mistrust of government. And I think the way that we break down those barriers is to give people positive experiences when they first land in the island, and positive experiences
can I just
when they
clarify
are.
that? I mean,
Yeah.
it's people are often coming from countries where there is even less trust in the government. And so it's not the normal behaviour for governments to help them, and so that's, I think,
That's exactly it. So what we need to get across to people is that, you know, we've got a supportive government. We will help people with their problems. So it's an individual rather than a building, but the project remains largely the same.
So it's so the budget line is essentially a budget line for a person, funding a person.
Yeah, and obviously some ancillary costs, but it won't be an actual building unless we need to pay a small amount of rent if they are.
the budget. Do you know what the proposed budget is off the top of our heads? Forget now. There was a.
Is there a slight branding issue here? I mean, in the sense that when people hear about an international cultural centre, they're probably not going to expect to be directed to a person.
Yeah, I mean, the concept, maybe it does need rebranding, but the concept is it gives people the support that they need. And there, you know, there are already lots of organisations that do that, so it's just finding the right home for it.
I think we've got to focus on providing the service to people coming here. And over the past few weeks, office have engaged with a range of stakeholders to promote the service, such as immigration, citizen advice, various service hubs and local charities. So it's about coordinating efforts and
can you
providing a
clarify
service.
the target market, if you like, because you know we have international cultures here from at the lower end of the market. We also have people of a massive cultural diversity at the top end of the market, if you like. Yeah. I mean, who is this aimed at? It's not a celebration of culture. Is it a targeted support for people in vulnerable positions?
Broadly targeted support for anyone that needs it, yeah. So that could be someone who's more vulnerable, but it might not. But it's also getting people to understand the island better and our culture and heritage and the way we operate. So there's a dual aspect.
How does it link in with the Jersey Identity Project?
Yeah, I suppose there are links because they are trying to achieve the same aim. So we're trying to assist people in, you know, adopting our culture and also improving that trust in government.
So as well as sort of an orientation or role for people who arrive here new, there's support with housing to find accommodation, understand tenancy agreements and resolve housing issues if necessary for new tenants, provide information about how they access the healthcare service and support navigating that, and references and links in relation to immigration for residency permits and understanding the immigration laws and all that kind of things.
I'm quite interested in it in the sense of if it's a person, we also have the high value residency officer, or whatever that role is officially called. They perform a role championing within government for that sector. They try and coordinate and and would the aim be to do a similar thing in this regard? Would this person not just face outwards? Could they face in and recommend changes and, you know, if things are not?
Well, of course,
picking up problems.
The structure. Deputy Els is political lead on the structure, working with Deputy Gardner and the steering group. I think is the steering group still in place? So there is a body that manage and decide how they want to deliver these services, and we're open to their suggestions and direction of travel. But I think they've moved away more from spending money on the celebratory aspects of the community to sort of a more practical form of support, because that's what I think they felt was needed most. And so far, I think since 14th of July, there's been 3 referrals so far. So it's starting to gain a little bit of momentum.
And can we just get clarity about where the budget line and ministerial responsibility
Cabinet
lies?
Office,
Because I think it is still the Cabinet Office.
Yeah, it's moved.
It's the ESSH department, so Employment, Social Security and Housing.
Who is the ministerial lead,
Deputy Els.
even though it's moved?
Well, she's Assistant Minister of Education.
Minister to...
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think for the Assistant Chief Minister now on the Freedom of Information Law and its review, can you update us on the work to update the FOI procedures and whether the review outcomes are still on track for delivery by the end of the year?
Thank you. So still on track for delivery by the end of the year. I promised that there would be an interim report, which I've got in draft form. That will be coming out within the next couple of weeks. Once it's been through the process, of course, we'll share it with Scrutiny. And what it looks at is the provision of better access to quality information, a proper organised publication scheme, and also looking at including ALOs within the ambit of the law. So that's laid out in the interim report. There'll also be a consultation exercise and a quick survey at the back of that so that we can gauge from stakeholders and individuals that where we're going is kind of the right way to go.
Is it expected work can start at the point of, or reform can happen from the interim report, or will, yeah.
We can make. We've had some quick wins along the way by just starting to look at what Statistics Jersey do and learn from that model. You know, what we looked at is the pattern of requests. Some people ask for reports every year at the same time. Let's just publish those as soon as we can, rather than wait for people to ask for them.
It's interesting to note that currently freedom of information requests sometimes get launched in with tranches, and that until midweek this week, the most recent update to the FOI releases was the 20th of June. So there's almost 3 weeks in which nothing was published.
Yeah.
Is work going on at the moment to improve the speed of release?
Yeah. So unfortunately, part of the process there is it's still quite a manual process to get those completed FOIs on the website. So a big significant part of the report is how we can digitalise more of the process, because it can be quite cumbersome and clunky in the background. And that was something that straight away I thought, how can we use technology to make this process better?
And will that require funding?
Yeah, there will be some funding needed. Hopefully it won't be, it shouldn't be too difficult, but it's, yeah, for some
we'll see
reason
something in the budget.
they're embedded in these processes that we just need to look at and do
You
something
never know,
different.
it might not be additional funding, it might be
Pre-prioritised.
delivered
Yeah,
within
to be
the
moved.
an existing budget, because it's more efficient.
There's a firm aim to improve systems.
No,
Okay, lovely.
yeah, but it'll produce savings because we do have staff working on manual processes that they really shouldn't be.
There's frequent criticism of the difficulty of finding information relating to government. The Policy Centre has made some fairly trenchant criticisms of that. Is there anybody looking at that ability to sort of make information more accessible, clearer to people, so that they can get hold of information without
Absolutely.
needing to-
That is at the heart of this review, is how we can make information more accessible but easier to find and easier to understand. And you know, we're aware that sometimes people searching on the website isn't the easiest way for them to find information. So it's how we can be clear. If we have a proper publication scheme in place, there will be one place to find that information, and it should be easier to link to than it is.
And coordination between the States of Jersey website as opposed to the government website, because information sometimes appears, government information ends up being only findable on the States of Jersey website.
Exactly, and it's, you know, where does that responsibility land?
Okay, thank you. Just a few questions about the legislative programme. Management of death processes. In correspondence in March.
Development pool.
Yeah, a brief one on wills of succession. You recall that in May of this year, the JB had a brief article entitled Wills Law Review, and the opening paragraph was, Jersey's legislation relating to wills of succession is to be reviewed with a view to extending its scope to cover common law spouses and partners, the Chief Minister said. Are you able to advise us to what progress has been made on that front?
So the Legislative Advisory Panel received a brief at their last meeting on the project to amend the law. Officers are continuing to liaise with colleagues in drafting, and a more substantive update is expected at the next LAP meeting. So the amendments are seeking to provide that dower, well, you know the detail, I think, of it, that dower should give the right of life enjoyment with the matrimonial and civil partnership and so forth.
Yes,
So it's proceeding, but where are we with that substantive update?
So it is in the development pool, and, but as the Chief Minister said, it is proceeding. What we tried to do with the development pool is, in the downtime of drafters, it allows them to continue to work on material. It's an amber effectively, so that it's not stopped. And if drafters have some capacity, they can continue to progress it, as can policy officers. So it will hopefully be in a position that the next council ministers could pick it up and lodge it if they wish.
So on that, I mean, I'm aware from my own involvement on LAP that the Dower aspect was taken to the end, and I think it is a question of drafting mainly now. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
So you suggest that won't be done during the current assembly,
It will be worked on in the downtime. I can't give you...
if there is any?
If there is any, what I can't say is that it will be lodged before the election. It is moment in time. I would say the likelihood is not.
Okay. And on the common law aspect, so that's at an earlier stage, presumably?
I think so, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. The next one that we've got on the list is the Controller and Auditor General Law. Is that still on track for lodging at the end of Q3?
Yes.
And the last one here is Power of Attorney Law. That's been moved into the development pool.
Yes, that's a capacity issue when we were looking at the prioritisation of the financial services policy team and the drafting that goes alongside that. And that was a conscious decision by the council ministers to deprioritise that. But as I said, only into a development pool. It can still be worked on in downtime. It's just less likely to be lodged before the election.
The Power of Attorney law's been in the pool for some time. I mean, it's been deferred. I mean, that will come back to this panel, I take it, will it, in due course?
If you wish to see it, yes, of course.
You would, yeah. Thank you. A final couple of questions for me that I didn't ask earlier on, and that's around the gender pay gap. We were told that the action plans with businesses were going to be developed before the end of 2025. So can you give us an update on the progress to that work?
Yeah. So what we've been doing is working with Scotland Institute of Directors to produce a framework for Jersey. We're hoping that that will come back to us in October, and then we can start to show what would best practice would look like. So that's kind of on target.
Thank you. And one of the recommendations that we had from this panel in particular over the last budget, although we didn't pursue it because it was quite new, was the issue about gender responsive budgeting. Are you taking into account gender responsiveness when you're planning for this year's budget?
Indeed, we are, and there's a number of initiatives that are already in the budget. So the implementation of the recommendations from the Vaughan report, provision of school meals is another really important part of that. And there was another one.
Childcare.
And free childcare provision. So, you know, we're taking that into account in our budgeting process.
I'm quite pleased to hear that, because the recommendation that we made last year, you actually rejected. So are you now saying that you accept that recommendation about a gender responsive budgeting focus?
Well, I think there was a move in that direction.
I have to re-look at the wording on that, but let's say progress is being made.
Yeah.
Thank you. As I say, it's just a heads up that
Okay.
it is something that we will be concentrating on in particular. And as you know, other jurisdictions actually legislate for gender responsive budgeting.
I think it's even more relevant now in light of the birth rate challenges and so forth. Yeah.
And the women's health.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Particularly, and children's health. Yeah.
No, I mean, whereas, I mean, you can obviously pick out individual things which are relevant to gender pay gaps, but the gender responsive budgeting is supposed to sit across everything, so that you're always considering.
In policy development.
Yeah, exactly. And
I think we need to understand, the civil servants need to understand, because officers obviously pay a lot of attention to the 2013 Act, and they have policy guidance and policy templates that compel them to think about these issues in the formulation of policy. So one of the things I think would be interesting to go back to your propositions to see the gap that sits on top of that this would fill through legislation and what the evidence is from elsewhere.
Yeah. Thank you.
I've got another question which is totally unrelated, but
Well, we have got a little bit of time, so if you would like to ask another question. No, we won't. But
it returns to the question of infrastructure funding.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about where it would be spent, but I think there's also a lot of interest in where the money would come from. And obviously the Deputy Chief Minister raised some possibilities in terms of either borrowing or reserves. I wonder if you can tell us anything at all about whether there is a sort of step change planned here in policy terms, in terms of accessing money that in a ways that might not have been done in the past. Is that under consideration?
Okay, yeah, can I just clarify you? I think when you refer to Deputy Chief Minister, before I say he was making an announcement, he was referring to possibilities. He was promoting what he believed in and that he wanted to do, that he wanted to bring to Council of Ministers. I just wanted to clarify that point. There's no change in policy currently insofar as we are trying to balance the books out of revenue, income and expenditure. There are massive challenges coming down the road in relation to the cost of health and the cost of education and the costs of extended nursery support and so forth. But at the moment, there are no plans to go to the reserves. But if somebody, because we don't need to go to the reserves, we're trying to find other ways of balancing. Now, the other jurisdictions will look at the way they fund capital investment, and quite ironically, we can borrow because our reserves and our investments have been performing so well. Not quite so well, I don't think, this year as opposed to last year, but still performing well. Sometimes it's better to borrow for certain types of investment than it is to dip into our reserve, and that remains a way of thinking currently. So there's been no real step change. But of course, you can never rule that out because we don't know what's around the corner.
So is it being considered, for example, to borrow against the Social Security Reserve Fund? Or to take money from the leverage in some way the Social Security Reserve Fund.
The Social Security Fund has invested in, for example, the acquisition of Union Street, because that's a good return. So we'll always look to the Social Security Fund and the Social Security Fund will be wanting to invest in certain capital projects that shows a return, and I see that continuing.
It's a question of whether there's a policy intent here to shift some of those investment strategies wherever possible to help support, say, Invest in Jersey.
I don't think there's been a proper policy shift. We haven't decided to shift the policy there, but it's certainly a topic of discussion. Certain ministers have said, look, we've got X billion pounds sitting there, which we could put to work in our own community rather than lending it. It's ironic. The Social Security Fund might invest in civic projects in other jurisdictions, and why couldn't we invest in civic projects in our jurisdiction? Those are the sort of conversations we're having.
Thank you. We've come to the end of our questions, so does the panel have any other
We have 10 minutes of Q1.
Quick questions.
I have one that we didn't manage to touch on following Deputy Renniff, which is about infrastructure and linking to our earlier conversation on population policy. No doubt we will learn more soon about what you're proposing for infrastructure renewal in a long term till 2050, 2060. But under what population modelling are you modelling that infrastructure at the moment? You didn't have a clear number for what the population policy may look like, growing population. How are you modelling the investment you need if we don't have a number to work on?
Paul, did you want to start on that?
Yeah, so the numbers issue is perennial. It is the question that is put when we publish any population policy. What it's up to any given council ministers. We need to find a way to support our ageing population. We know that if we do nothing, we will effectively stagnate as we are and have been for the past 5 years, and that will result in a lower amount of working age population. So the Investing in Jersey programme, if it's adopted, will be about making sure that the infrastructure is there to support any number of growth, be it housing, transport, utilities, infrastructure.
So we could be over-investing. If we invest in gold-plated infrastructure for a population of 140,000 and decide that's not what we want, You see where I'm going is kind of the
I
plan
think
may
that's why
invest
it's
in.
important we need to run through the detail with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll wait for that for the detail. Constable Johnson, did you have anything that you
No,
wished
well,
to
okay.
add? So, okay. I think we're going to draw that to a close slightly early. Is there anything, Chief Minister, that you would like to ask us as a panel?
No, I think, but thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe.